Hello and welcome to Gender Forking, the Life and Death podcast. My name is Sam.
And my name is Lori.
So,
we did it again.
Yeah, yet again. Here we go. Let's set the scene.
It's September 1st.
Yesterday. No. 2 days ago?
Okay.
Yes, 2 days ago.
Okay.
August 30th.
Yeah.
I am editing the podcast because I'm a fantastic editor and I know what I'm doing.
And Sam's doing all the hard work on this podcast.
I'm doing so much hard work. I'm editing episode 6. It's hilarious. It's fresh. It's authentic. It's catchy. And then I'm finishing. I'm literally putting on, I'm about to put on the outro music, and then GarageBand crashes, and I open it up, and all the data is gone, and I've lost the episode, and it's happened again. And I literally go through the 5 stages of grief.
Yeah, and she's texting me the whole time, and I am at work in a meeting, oh no.
I'm in denial, this did not happen again. I didn't do this again. And then anger, this cannot be happening. This is so dumb.
She's bargaining on the phone with Apple support.
Bargaining on the phone with Apple support. And then depression, because I'm so upset to have lost this brilliant masterpiece that will never see the light of day. And then acceptance, which is we can just do it again.
So if you're wondering why I don't sound like I'm recording from beyond the grave, it's because I have rented a microphone from my school's library. Hopefully this will sound a little bit better than the re-recorded episode 2. And I'm also forcing everyone that lives with me to suffer in the heat so that the air conditioner doesn't pick up on the track.
We're artists. Mm-hmm. Thanks, JJ. Thanks, Sarah.
Shout out to y'all.
Oh, we have to do the forecast.
Yes.
Forecast, the weather in Forks. It is partly cloudy and 64 degrees. Every freaking time we do this, it's sunny in Forks.
Yeah.
It's gonna get down to 49. It's cool now.
Yeah, it's cooling down.
There's some rain in a couple days though, but it's summer, so the vampires don't have to go to school. So
they just get to hunt in the woods.
They're camping.
Yeah, they're camping. They're camping with their cousins in Alaska.
Today's episode of the podcast, episode 6, it is entitled Vampire Sex Ed. We will be discussing chapters 14 through 16 of Life and Death by Stephanie Meyer. And these are great chapters. We are just post Meadow Scene. And I have a copy of Twilight with me now. And Laura
and I have a copy of Life and Death, yeah.
So chapter 14, Mind Over Matter. We are leaving the Meadow Scene and we are driving back to Beau's house. The rest of this chapter is them staying at Beau's house at night because now Beau has learned that Edith watches him sleep sometimes.
Correct. Yes. Okay, cool.
The most prevalent part of this chapter is the conversation that they have, basically in Beau's room at night before he goes to sleep. Mm-hmm. So it's very different from Twilight in Life and Death, and I think it's worth cross-examining because they have a conversation about sex that is so much more in detail that it is in Twilight. It's so much.
Oh yeah, I remember that now.
It makes me angry because why didn't we have this in Twilight?
Yeah, so Charlie comes home, but then Edith is already in Beau's room.
Yeah, so let's see what our good friend Edward Cullen says. Basically, what the situation is Beau / Bella asking Edward / Edith, if they're ever going to be able to have sex someday. Mm-hmm. What Bella says to start this conversation is, you said that Rosalie and Emmett will get married soon. Is that ... marriage ... the same as it is for humans? And he says, is that what you're getting at? And then she's like, I don't know. And then he says, yes, I suppose it is much the same. I told you most of those human desires are there, just hidden behind more powerful desires. Oh, was all I could say. Was there a purpose behind your curiosity? Well, I did wonder, ... about you and me, ... someday, ... He was instantly serious. I could tell by the sudden stillness of his body. I froze too, reacting automatically. I don't think that... that ... would be possible for us. And she says, because it would be too hard for you if I were that ... close.
I hate this.
I know. And he says, that's certainly a problem, but that's not what I was thinking of. It's just that you are so soft, so fragile. I have to mind my actions every moment that we're together so that I don't hurt you. I could kill you quite easily, Bella, simply by accident. His voice had become a soft murmur. If I was too hasty, if for 1 second I wasn't paying enough attention, I could reach out, mean to touch your face, and crush your skull by mistake. You don't understand how incredibly breakable you are. I can never afford to lose any kind of control when I'm with you. And then she's basically like, do you even find me attractive? Like, do you think that, like, I'm attractive in that way
Edward's
at all?
like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, he says, I may not be a human, but I am a man.
Which is so stupid. And, like,
It's
also, gender doesn't have to exist for vampires.
Yeah, honestly. Why haven't they done away with the institution?
Yeah.
Let's,
Do you want me to, like, read the little
let's
piece
just
in Life and Death?
Yeah, let's go over to Life and Death, our friend.
So it's a little bit different, like, how the conversation even gets set up is they're, like, already talking, and Edith can kind of tell that Beau wants to ask her something. He's like, I shouldn't have brought it up, and she's like, please, and he's like, you won't get offended, and they, like, literally talk about this for longer. But then Beau is like, so I'm just an ordinary human guy, and you're the most beautiful girl I've ever seen, and I'm overwhelmed by you, and a part of that, naturally, is that I'm insanely attracted to you, which I'm sure you can't help but have noticed, what with your being, like, super aware of my circulatory system, but what I don't know is if it's like that for you, or if it's like sleeping and eating, which you don't need and I do, though I don't want them as much as I want you. You said that Eleanor and Royal go off and live like a married couple, but doesn't that even mean the same thing for vampires? This question is totally offside, completely not first date appropriate, and I'm sorry, and you don't have to answer. And then all Edith says is, I would have said this is our second date. And then she says, are you asking me about sex, Beau? And he says, yes. And then he says, I shouldn't have. And she said, I did climb into your bed, Beau. I believe that makes this line of inquiry quite understandable. She says, I told you that you could ask me anything. She paused and her voice was different, kind of formal like a teacher lecturing. So in the general sense, Sex and Vampires 101. We all started out human, Beau, and most of those human desires are still there, but just obscure behind more powerful desires. But we're not thirsty all the time, and we tend to form very strong bonds. Physical and emotional. And now in the specific sense, Sex and Vampires 102, Beau and Edith. She sighed again, more slowly this time. I don't think that would be possible for us. And then he says, because I would have to get too close, I guess. That would be a problem, but that's not the main problem. Beau, you don't know how, well, fragile you are. Uses the word
like the same?
Fragile instead of soft.
Yeah, you're so soft, so fragile.
Yeah. Edith says, Beau, you don't know how fragile you are. I don't mean that as an insult to your manliness. Anyone human is fragile to me. I have to mind my actions every moment that we're together so I don't hurt you. I could kill you quite simply by accident, whatever.
Yeah, all that
Which
stuff.
is the same. But, like, the difference in the way that she has to, like, break this, like, no sex news to her boyfriend is that, like, she not only has to, like, break this terrible news to Beau, but she also has to make sure she does it in a way that doesn't insult his manliness.
I think throughout the book, Beau is sort of like, I can't be emasculated, but it's because Edith is like a vampire, so she's special, and like, yeah, like I can't expect to be like a vampire,
right? So it like kind of is just like he doesn't have to worry about it, whereas like maybe in a human relationship he would worry about it. Yeah.
So not only do we have like this sort of qualifying conversation about emasculation, they also have like it's so much more in depth.
Yeah.
Like the conversation that they're having about sex versus what Bella and Edward say, and it's so much more direct. Like, they say the word sex.
Yeah. They say the word sex and they like frankly talk about it. Also, I'm pretty sure that in Twilight, Bella doesn't directly ask if Edward has any experience with sex and humans.
No, they say like I'll find the exact wording. But it's very vague.
Yeah.
Yeah, he asks, "Are you scared?" And she says, "No, I'm fine." And he says, "I'm curious now though. Have you ever ... He trailed off suggestively, and she says, "Of course not," I flushed. "I told you I've never felt like this about anyone before, not even close." And then that's when she's like, "Do you even find me attractive at all?" Mm-hmm. But he says, "I know other people's thoughts. I know that love and lust don't always keep the same company." And she said, "They do for me now that they exist for me at all." And then he says, "We have one thing in common at least."
Yes.
So they're both virgins.
So yeah, that's established here too, but it's different. Because Edith says, "Can I ask you something now? Something potentially offensive?" And Beau says, "It's your turn." And Edith says, "Do you have any experience with sex and humans?" And Bo says, I was a little surprised that my face didn't go hot again. It felt natural to tell her everything. Not even a little bit. This is all first for me. I told you, blah, 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 blah. The same thing that Bella says, but then they have the, like, love and lust conversation. Edith starts...
And then it goes on, right?
Yeah, Edith starts talking and is like, would you like me to tell you the things that distract me about you? And talks about, like, those eyes. And then...
Yeah, it gets, like, super, like... not super sexual, but like super sexual for this book.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have anything like that in Twilight. Like, they just go to sleep after that in Twilight, or she goes to sleep.
Yeah, Edith like talks about Beau's eyes and then his arms and then his hair and then, but it's just really funny because she's like, I didn't even mention your hair, and he's like, okay, now I know you're making fun. And she says, I'm not. You know, your hair is precisely the same shade as a teak inlaid ceiling in a monastery I once stayed at in Cambodia. And she says, in what I think would be considered Cambodia now.
Oh my god, fuck off, Edith.
It's just like, I just feel like maybe Stephanie
so
regretted not putting more tender moments between Bella and Edward in Twilight.
Yeah.
And like maybe added this in or something like that. But I'm also just like...
Well, she's also had like... She's had like 10 years to reflect on these characters and like to see how other people interact with them. Like before they were only hers and only she knew about them, but now like I don't know, there's 5 movies about them and like there's like this huge like sexual craze about them, and so maybe she's come to see them as more sexual, but or maybe it was just Catherine Hardwicke.
Maybe Catherine Hardwicke wrote this. Oh my god.
Like, yeah, Catherine Hardwicke like kidnapped her and forced her to write Life and Death.
Catherine Hardwicke ghost wrote Life and Death.
Just to sum up that, it's obviously like such a huge double standard that in both situations it's like Beau and Edward are the ones who are being more explicit about sex, and like, and it's the same like throughout Life and Death. Like Beau has been like initiating so much more physical contact with Edith than Bella and Edward ever had,
and like thinking about Edith and like the narration in a more sexual way, and like mentioning more like her body type and like her physical appearance much more so than Bella ever did with Edward.
I'm gonna scream.
Yeah. Let's go hang out with the Cullens.
Yeah, chapter 15. So in chapter 15, Beau goes to meet the Cullens officially for the first time. Like, Edith brings him over and to meet her family. Something that stood out to me when I read Life and Death is that, so in Twilight, Bella wears this really iconically terrible outfit to meet the Cullens. She wears a button-down khaki skirt to meet her boyfriend's family. And it's like, this was 2005, but it was not ever...
It was never a look. No.
Ever.
We have a fashion expert in the room with me. Would you ever wear a floor-length khaki skirt?
Never.
She would never wear a floor-length khaki skirt.
I was so disheartened because I really wanted to know like what Beau wears, but it's not commented on. He wears a hoodie.
Yeah, it just says a hoodie, and like there's no like, and like I don't necessarily think that I like want Beau to wear something really cringy because I want the best for him, but
yeah, but he's already worn the Monty Python t-shirt.
Yeah, and it's only fair.
Yeah. He's worn the Monty Python t-shirt, and he's worn, I don't know if you remember this, but he wore to bed just the night before that we were talking about.
Oh my god, the pig.
Yeah, he wore the pig
with
t-shirt.
The,
the barbecue,
and Edith's like upset by it because she's he looks too happy to be food. Like,
right.
Shut the fuck up. It's a t-shirt.
Yeah. So yeah, there's no equivalent for that, which is
tragic.
Interesting. Tragic, yeah, is what I mean.
Interesting.
It's all very interesting. That's like, when I say something is interesting on this podcast, it's a euphemism for terrible.
Yeah. We're just like trying
time.
to protect ourselves in case Stephanie Meyer listens to this podcast and like decides that because of this she's like pushed over the edge and will never write Midnight Sun because she's afraid we'll do a podcast on it.
She should be afraid.
She should be afraid because I am interested in doing that.
If she wrote Midnight Sun, then like this podcast wouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
And it's like that would be good for her, so it's her own fault.
It's like you caused this.
Reading Life and Death kind of brings about like a new take on Twilight, obviously, but like kind of allows me to revisit it with fresh eyes. And I was thinking about how the Cullens' home, it's like their safe space, kind of.
Yeah, totally.
And like bringing in a human like Beau kind of ruins it with the scent of his blood and kind of like interrupts that space.
Yeah, if I were Jessamine or Royal specifically, because I know that Archie and Eleanor don't really care, and like obviously Ernest? What the fuck?
Yeah, Ernest would never accept not bringing Bo.
Yeah. If I were Jessamine or Royal, I'd be pretty pissed that you bring a human into the one place in my life that I can just, like, be myself and, like, don't have to smell human blood. I wouldn't be thrilled about that.
But yeah, the Cullens' home is, like, notoriously beautiful. They do it a little bit more modern in the movie, but in the book it's supposed to look more traditional from the outside.
It's like says but it's about like 100 years old.
Yeah, and then but the back they've replaced with all like windows, which is where they get the movie concept from, I think. It's interesting like how the Cullens' house has turned out in terms of style. Because they come from so many different time periods, especially like if you're thinking about like Carlisle versus like Emmett.
Yeah.
Like they've lived through so many different periods of fashion and interior design. Like it's a miracle that like their house isn't incredibly tacky and like looks like a hoarder's nest.
Exactly. Yeah, you would think that like it would be really hard for them all to agree on like one cohesive style. On the inside, it doesn't really matter.
Probably Archie would never let them live. Archie/Alice would never let them live like a gross looking lifestyle.
Yeah, or Ernest/Esme.
Yeah,
because she's supposed to be really. They are supposed to be really like passionate about interior design. Honestly, best way to practice gender neutral pronouns is to read Life and Death and have to refer to all the characters in a gender neutral way because they exist as both for you now.
Obviously, like Carlisle/Corrine has this huge like old cross that their father made in the 1600s, so like they do have sentimental value for some objects. I don't really know like what a vampire's sense of home is. Obviously, like for a nomadic vampire they don't have one, but even the Cullens have to move every like couple of years, which for them is like super quick anyway, and it's also just to keep up appearances.
It makes me wonder like how did Corrine how did they like get that cross? Like, did they take it and carry it with them literally everywhere they went? Like some Jesus figure, like, running through the land of Europe?
Like when they move, like that's a good point in general for, like, when they move. Like, they must accrue some personal values, like, valuable items. Like, because we know, I don't know, we know from the book that Carlisle Corrine has, like, a bunch of books and paintings in their office. Like that's like all really old valuable stuff, and they can't like when they move like they have enough stuff that they can't like pick it up and run with it,
right? Because
so, like do they U-Haul across the country?
Do they literally road trip across the country? Or like in the past too, like did they like take covered wagon? Like what did they do when like cars weren't always around, but they had to move? And like I don't know what kind of material like stuff they had back then, because it wasn't as common to have a ton of stuff. But like a huge cross, like you can't just run across the country carrying a huge cross.
Yeah, I mean they probably just ship it.
That's true.
And like if they're planning ahead of time, they probably can ship and then like they themselves run.
Yeah, there's like a lot of logistics there.
In the AU, where everyone in Twilight / Life and Death is a lesbian, where it's just the women versions of all these characters, and they're U-hauling.
Oh my god, yes. That's so great.
Someone write it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh, so I remember this from Life and Death, because it's traumatizing. When, like everything that I remember, when Bo meets Archie for the first time, they have a self-described bro hug.
Oh, yes. That's upsetting.
Which is so... Yeah, it's upsetting. It's not anything that Alice would never. Archie's not a bro.
No.
Neither is Bo. Neither of them... Like, why can't men have normal physical contact?
Yeah, there's no... Neither of them would initiate that or be comfortable with it, like, happening. Just have a hug.
We meet Ernest. I don't know if we've already said that Ernest is the name of Esme, the gender-swapped name of Esme.
That one bothers me a lot.
But
I know there's a lot of E-names happening.
Yeah,
but they're all like Edward, Edwin, Ernest, Esme, Eleanor, Emmett. None of them are normal.
Yeah.
Except maybe Eleanor, I guess.
Yeah, I always like think that, like, confuse Eleanor, Esme, Ernest. Like, I don't know who's who. So they come into the house. We meet Archie and Jessamine. Well, we already know them, but Bo is officially meeting Archie and Jessamine and Ernest Ernest and Corinne, and they talk, and it's very pleasant. We sit down at the piano where Edith plays Beau the song that she has written.
Oh, you're about to say this, aren't you? The teardrop thing.
Yeah.
I'm really bothered by this.
Okay, so Beau, first of all, Beau's lullaby, we don't know what it sounds like.
Right.
I'd like to think that it's different from Bella's lullaby, which was done perfectly in the film.
I would also like to
my
think it's
opinion.
different.
Yeah.
Because the handwriting is different of these people and, like, some other arbitrary things, so there's really no reason for me to believe that, like, this lullaby would be the same.
So in Twilight, what happens is that Edward's playing Bella her lullaby, and she's very moved by it, so much that she sheds a couple of tears. Bella has cried multiple times in this book, so, like, that's normal. I gotta read it.
Yeah.
I gotta call attention to this super strange moment.
This doesn't happen in the movie, and, like, thank God, because I don't want to see it with my eyes, and just knowing that it happens in print is upsetting.
She's crying. She says, "Thank you. I realized there were tears in my eyes. I dabbed at them, embarrassed. He touched the corner of my eye, trapping one I'd missed." Stop. He lifted his finger, examining the drop of moisture broodingly.
If that's not, like, the best description, the one sentence description of Edward Cullen.
Yeah. And then, so quickly I couldn't be positive that he really did, he put his finger to his mouth to taste it. I looked at him questioningly, and he gazed back for a long moment before he finally smiled, and then they talk about something else and never discuss that again.
It's like,
so
the fandom has
eats her tear.
Conveniently forgotten this fact. Yeah. And it's Sam's personal mission to remind everyone about once a month that this happened. And every time I'm like, I don't want to participate in this.
We black it out because it's so uncomfortable. Like, why did he do that?
It's
okay, and
like,
then so in Life and Death, this doesn't happen because Beau doesn't cry.
Yeah.
He's never cried before.
Beau doesn't cry, so there's no equivalent. Like, there's no tear for Edith to taste.
No Tears Left to Taste by Ariana Grande. Oh my God. I'm gonna change the title of this episode.
Oh my God. No Tears Left to Taste. Gross.
So while Beau is meeting the Cullens for the first time, he notices that Jessamine has used her power of basically
emotional manipulation.
Emotional manipulation. Yeah. She's making everyone feel more calm, even though, like, things are going pretty well. But he notices that it's happening, and what he says is, like, something along the lines of, like, "Oh, it kind of feels like the way I do when Jules is around," which is so random.
Okay.
He randomly brings up Jules while meeting his girlfriend's family.
There was something like a lion about her now when she was just standing there about Jessamine. But despite that, I was suddenly totally comfortable. It felt like I was in my own place, surrounded by people I knew well. Easy, kind of like when Jules was around. It was strange to feel that here, and then I remembered what Edith had told me about what Jessamine could do. That was weird to think about. It didn't feel like someone was using magic or whatever on me. And I think the first time we read this, we were like, is this, like, Stephenie Meyer reflecting on this imprint discourse of, like,
I don't know, it's so forced to for him to be thinking about her in this moment.
It's like,
it doesn't happen in Twilight.
It's like Stephenie realizes that she's not going to write the new moon and eclipse equivalent of this new alternative series, so she like has to throw in as many things about Jules as possible, because, like, as we know, Jules isn't really a big character in Twilight, or Jacob isn't really a big character in Twilight, and so, like, there's no time for Jules' character to really be just, like, developed, so maybe she's just trying to throw in, like, a one-liner there, and, like,
oh yeah, Jules still exists, remember?
Yeah.
I don't know if we talked about this in earlier episodes or not, but Stephenie Meyer acknowledged that she didn't realize that people were, like, not gonna like Jacob later on. So, like, I think that maybe she's trying harder to be like, she's likable, like, we like Jules. It's really forced.
It is.
It's a forced moment.
It's like, I feel like the whole series, though, is, like, Stephenie trying to be like, you have to like Jacob, and me being like, bet. I don't, and it's like, I don't mind Jacob in Twilight. I really don't. I just didn't,
because he's not really a character.
I didn't think he was anything to write home about. And then, like, New Moon, I was like, whomst? And then Eclipse, I was like, wow, canceled.
Go away. But I mean, Jules is likable. Like, you don't have to convince me. But you also don't need to, like, bring her up while Beau is meeting his girlfriend's family. It's very strange.
Yeah, and they, like, don't hang out.
Yeah, like, he hasn't seen her in, like, a hot second. Yeah, that was really strange.
Yeah, that was a weird moment. I think in the end of 15, they start talking about Corinne's backstory.
So this is super
this is really interesting, and this is so, like, super gendered. I can read it because I don't think people are gonna remember I feel like
Yeah.
the majority of people that are like familiar with Twilight are really familiar with the movie, and the movie doesn't really talk too much about Carlisle. So I can read this.
Just as a backdrop, we're about to learn about Corinne's character. If you don't remember, she is a doctor.
Yeah.
And she was born like 400 years ago.
She was born 362 years ago. But she was born in London in the 1640s, and time wasn't marked as accurately then for the common people. It was before Cromwell's rule, though. And she was the only daughter of an Anglican pastor. Her mother died in childbirth, and her father was a hard man, driven. He believed very strongly in the reality of evil, and he led hunts for witches, werewolves, and vampires.
So she hasn't switched the dad. Like, her dad is still... Like,
Yeah.
Carlisle was talking about his father, and the father is still a man in Life and Death.
The first time I read this, I was kind of like, is this the character that gets a coup?
Yeah, for sure, because it's like, why didn't she change him? And it's like, okay, you admit that, like, there is some gendered part of, like, being a pastor in this year.
Yeah,
like,
in 1640,
you have to acknowledge, like, the relationship between gender and religion, and, like, the history there. She seems to understand that, and like I totally understand why that was kept the same, but she doesn't apply the same thing to Corinne at all.
Mm-hmm. So Corinne did what she could do to protect the innocent people that like her father was burning, and she was a really big believer in a scientific method, which is like new in the 1640s. And she tries to convince her father to look past superstition. And
do we get more details about this story in Life and Death?
Yeah, I feel like we might. Corinne says, like, that she remembers the night... Well, this isn't Corinne talking, this is Edith giving Corinne's story. Edith is saying, Corinne remembers the night clearly for a human memory. It was the kind of thing that would stick in your mind. Her father came home really late. Corinne had waited up and worried. He was furious. And Corinne tries to calm him, but he ignored her. And then there was a man in the middle of their small room, and who was, like, ragged, dressed like a beggar, but his face was beautiful, and he spoke Latin. Because of her father's vocation and her own curiosity, Corinne was unusually educated for a woman in those days. She understood what the man said. He told her father that he was a fool and would pay for the damage he had caused. The preacher threw himself in front of his daughter to protect her.
We don't get these details, I don't think, in Twilight.
Yeah, I think that this is something that Stephanie wanted to develop a little bit more. And then the vampire smiled. He told the preacher, go to your hell, knowing this, that what you love will become all that you hate. He tossed the preacher to the side and grabbed Corinne. He made sure that the preacher knew what would happen to Corinne, and then he killed the preacher very slowly while Corinne watched, writhing in pain and horror. The vampire left. Corinne knew that her fate, if someone found her in this condition, anything infected by the monster would have to be destroyed. She acted instinctively to save her own life. Despite the pain she was in, she crawled into the cellar and buried herself in a pile of rotting potatoes for 3 days. It's a miracle she was able to keep silent to stay undiscovered. And then Beau's like, what happened next? And then Edith is like, I'll show you. Yeah. And then they go to Corinne's office.
I feel like it's interesting that Edith gives Beau all of, like, these gory details, and I feel like Edward was always sparing Bella, like, potentially disturbing information because he didn't want to scare her, and I don't know, that feels a little bit different, but
I think it's definitely just that, like Edward viewed Bella as, like, a really fragile, incapable person, and, like, Edith gives a lot more credit to Beau and, like, involves him a lot more in, like, discussions, and, like, doesn't lie.
Well, he's a man, so of course he's capable.
She doesn't lie as much as Edward does, or, like, withhold information in the same way.
That's true.
It's just like, it gives off of a healthier relationship vibe.
So in the next section, we kind of learn more about Corinne and her becoming a doctor, which is very interesting and historically inaccurate on behalf of Stephanie Meyer. Because Stephanie Meyer kind of claims that, like, Corinne was, like, getting all kinds of training and, like, was able to go to school, but no one would hire her, as if, like, she would even ever be able to go to school, like, before, like, the last, I don't know, couple of decades.
Yeah, like, absolutely not. Even if Corinne was allowed to sit in on classes, because that happened quite frequently, is that, like, women were allowed to, I guess, like, what you would call the equivalent of today, like, audit a class, where, like, you can go to the class and learn, but you will never be awarded a degree with your name on it for, like, the medical field if you're a woman in the 1700s, first of all.
Really, really reaching.
It's a huge reach.
It's just a completely different, like, the way that Corinne and all of the women now, all the women who are Cullens in Twilight and Life and Death, the way that they experienced, you know, the last 100 or hundreds of years is super different from the way that either their male counterparts or male versions of themselves would experience it. And I wish that Stephanie Meyer had, I mean, I think there was a way that she could have made this make more sense instead of being like, yeah, she went to school, she was a doctor like 300 years ago. Like, she could have given Kareen access to more traditionally feminine, like, holistic healing practices, like, I don't know, healing arts, even things related to witchcraft traditionally, like doula work and like other things like that.
Yeah, westernized, like, traditional medicine is not the only type of medicine that exists, and like, it would have been cool to have Kareen have a background in that, whereas Carlisle's background was much more like by the book.
Yeah, he's literally like a European Protestant man.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting too, like, if you think about how even today, women in stereotypically masculine roles, like, I'm thinking of Kareen in the role of a doctor, like, they still experience gender depression in the workplace. Like, that must be hyper frustrating if you're a vampire.
Yeah.
Because you know that you could literally, like, kill and ruin anyone, and, like, you know that you're better than everyone. And, like, I feel like maybe it makes Kareen less apt to imposter syndrome, or, like, the feeling that you don't, like, belong, or, like, the feeling that, like, you got there by accident, which is what imposter syndrome is. It makes her, like, less susceptible to that than other, like, female doctors in, like, 2005? But, so, like, there's some privilege there, some vampire privilege. But it also must be super frustrating, like, seeing someone, like, take you for granted or, like, underestimate you and being like, well, actually, I'm way older than you, I know way more than you, I have multiple degrees, and, like, I am undoubtedly more educated and, like, more equipped to deal with this situation than you are.
Yeah, I think it's just unrealistic that Carlisle and Kareen are supposed to be the same person. The way that Kareen would have experienced the last 300, 400 years would just make you a different person than Carlisle. I mean, sure, they'd probably just both be super compassionate still, probably, but, like, I think for Kareen, I mean, she literally wouldn't be able to be a doctor. Like, maybe she could have been a nurse for a while, but she wouldn't have been a doctor until, like, extremely recently. And then I feel like it would have caused her to pursue other medical interests, like, that aren't necessarily general practice the way that Carlisle does. I think that, like, she might be interested in, like, problems that, like, for example, women are having in health and medicine and things like that she can see are being underseen or, like, or undervalued in the field because of gender, because she's experiencing it herself. Whereas Carlisle can kind of, like, literally do whatever the fuck he wants for the last 400 years. Life has not changed for men.
True.
In the last, for white men.
True. It's only gotten,
the last 400 years.
like, slightly easier. Whereas, like, for women, it's gotten, like, better and worse and better and worse and better and worse. Cyclically, I feel. I was just thinking, this isn't necessarily related to Kareen, but, like, how, like, when colonization happens, women across the world, like, lose a lot of rights to a lot of things, and, like, vampire women, like, experience this as they're alive.
Yeah, I mean, if they want to, I mean, I know apparently not a lot of vampires choose to live in society like the Cullens do, but if I was a vampire as a woman, or, like, just not a man, I guess I would probably just choose to be a nomad, because I wouldn't want to live in a society.
Yeah, absolutely. And you probably wouldn't have the same ability to. Like, you'd have to find a vampire mate who would have to be a man to, like, get you property rights. You know?
Yeah, you couldn't live in society if you were just by yourself. That's true. Wow, that sucks.
Rip.
Wow. No tears left to taste.
No tears left to taste.
There was something that we noticed that is actually quite noticeable when you read Life and Death in this chapter. When Edith takes Beau into Kareen's study, she's pointing him to all these different paintings. And in Twilight, this is in Twilight where we see the Volturi for the first time, but we don't learn that they're the Volturi. It's a painting of Aro, Caius, and Marcus, but in Life and Death, it's different people, but they're just referred to as, like, the nighttime patrons of the arts, the same way that Edward refers to the Volturi in Twilight.
Sulpicia, Marcus, and Athenadora.
Yeah. So, like, that's interesting. Like, we don't really know at this point if that's significant at all, because at this point it's like, whomst the Stephenie Meyer thinks she is. I don't really want to say anything more about it.
Yeah. Oh, also,
I guess
Melee is in the picture.
Oh, right.
Sulpicia's,
always forget about her.
Servant to him.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's kind of implied that maybe, like, these people are the Volturi, but for no real reason, apparently. So that's an interesting thing to take note of, because that's the only time that we really, like, learn about the Volturi. But that kind of leads me into what I was going to say, that at the first time that we were reading this, when we hadn't read the rest of the book, we had some theories about how the book was going to turn out. And I would just like to restate them, because...
Sure. And not speculate on which ones could be true or not.
And not... Yes. The first one is that maybe Marcus is a character who gets a coup. And then the second one, I specifically remember having this, like, epiphany while reading it, that, like, this would be a really fantastic way for her to tie off this book, which was if the Huntress at the beginning of Life and Death is actually Victoria, and those villains have not been gender swapped.
Yeah.
And so we're actually killing, like, if we kill her off at the end of this book,
then there's
it breaks off. Yeah, it breaks off New Moon and Eclipse.
There's no threat in New Moon and Eclipse. Yeah. Because Victoria is, like, the enemy in those two books.
Yeah, and that would allow, like, Laurent and Irina to, like, live a happy life together.
Yeah.
And I don't know, something about James. I don't really know, like, what it would be for James.
We were saying that James... perhaps, I feel like, wouldn't have the same attachment to Victoria, perhaps, or, like, maybe the need to, avenge.
Or, like, even maybe if James, like, isn't even a character.
Yeah, like, James doesn't need to exist. James is pretty,
we don't know that.
Whatever.
Yeah. I guess, like, New Moon would still be possible, but it would just be, like, a depression story.
Yeah, and then Eclipse wouldn't be necessary.
Wouldn't really happen. Yeah. And I guess, like, if those vampires were gone, like, I don't know, I guess the stuff with the wolves, like, so many of the Quileutes turning into wolves wouldn't necessarily happen because the threat of vampires wasn't growing strong.
True.
So, like, a lot of them probably wouldn't even become werewolves.
I think some of the latest ones to turn would be Embry, Quill, Leah,
like,
and
the Clearwaters
Seth.
wouldn't turn.
So those four probably wouldn't turn into wolves.
Harry Clearwater would probably live.
True, Harry Clearwater.
I mean, he might die in a different way.
Right.
But, like, because he had a heart attack, so he probably, like, wasn't doing great. But
that's true.
He had a heart attack when he saw Victoria. Yeah, all the fish fry. But yeah, they probably wouldn't turn. So, like, it would just be completely different. This series of books, should Stephenie Meyer write the rest of them, although we know that she hasn't. So we know that she has to wrap it up some way, which is why I think Victoria being the Huntress would be... I stand by this. I think that Victoria being the Huntress would be a great ending to this book.
Yeah, I also think that.
We know how this book ends.
Yep, we sure do.
Stick around, it's really good. So the thing that happens next, in the next section, the next episode that you listen to, will be Vampire Baseball.
Yeah, the American pastime.
Well, stay tuned for Vampire Baseball. I guess we're going to meet the villains next time, I think.
Yeah, we should, yeah.
Start our chase scene.
Wow, the actual plot of Twilight is starting to happen, huh?
Yeah, the actual plot.
Wow.
It hasn't mattered. We've completely disregarded it.
270 pages so far. 280 pages so far have not mattered, but the plot is coming soon, everyone.
Watch out. All right, we'll see you next time.
That's all, folks.
Thank you for listening to Gender Forking. To stay updated about the podcast or to contact us, follow us on Twitter at genderforking or like us on Facebook at facebook.com/genderforking. For more Twilight content from us, you can follow our blog at bowlingshirtbellas.tumblr.com. If you haven't read Life and Death and you aren't reading along at home, visit bowlingshirtbellas.tumblr.com/genderforking for plot summaries and more information about the text. For other inquiries, you can email us at bowlingshirtbellas@gmail.com. The music you are hearing is Thursday in Snow Reprise by Blank Kit.